The night my mother told me to leave, the rain on Capitol Hill came down in sheets so heavy it made the streetlights look drunk. My trash bags, slumped on the curb like bloated seals, slick black and shining under neon. The bakery sign above us, Linden Street, buzzed on a failing ballast, a mosquito whine that hooked deep into the soft part under my jaw. Cinnamon and old grease drifted from the back door, clinging to my sweater. It should have smelled like home. "Take your things, Ava," my mother said, arms crossed under her apron, red nails flashing like small sirens against flour. "Dane thinks it's for the best." Dane leaned on the doorframe with a casualness he wore like cologne. His rain jacket creaked. Water bled from his cuffs onto the tile, ribboning to the floor drain. He smiled that too even smile, the one that made me feel like I was the joke he was telling himself. He didn't have to touch my mother to own the room. He only had to nod. "For the best," I repeated, tasting the bitter metal of adrenaline. The bags, my whole life, boiled to 4 contractor-sized bellies of sweaters and notebooks and a chipped mug, sat obedient as dogs waiting for a command. The cold of the night pressed its coins against my cheeks. Somewhere down Pine, a siren raked a blue comb across the wet. "I'm your daughter! You can't just—" "I can," she said, and her voice had that soft final drop that means a cake is done. "You've been stirring things, talking to people, making trouble with the bank. If you loved me, you wouldn't." Dane's look said, "We warned you." My fingers tightened around the mouth of a bag until the plastic squealed under my grip. In the alley, the dumpster exhaled the sour sweet of yeast. A bus hissed to a stop and then shouldered back into the rain. Everything moved. I stayed pinned. "Mom," I said, softer. "What did he tell you I did?" Her mouth trembled, then shuddered. "Go stay with a friend," she said. "We'll talk when you're calm." I looked at Dane and saw my reflection bent in his pupils, small and wet and ridiculous. The buzzing sign coughed, then steadied. I lifted the heft of my life and stepped into the rain. It was like walking into the walk-in freezer, everything tight and stinging at once. I didn't know it yet, but the thing I was being punished for wasn't what I'd said. It was what I was about to find. And once I found it, none of us would sleep under the same roof again. What kind of daughter knocks on a police door about her mother? My name is Ava Hart, 29 years old, born in a hospital that smells of lemon cleaner and coffee, raised in a bakery that smells of sugar and heat. I learned to count on the cash drawer, to tell the morning by the first espresso pull's sound, hiss, click, sigh, and to judge a person's mood by how they touched a pastry case. You think you can't tell? Watch a man drag a fingernail down the glass while he's deciding between croissant and pain au chocolat. He's halfway to rage. Watch a woman hover her palm over a cinnamon roll like it's a christening. She's looking for mercy. At Linden Street, mercy came in boxes tied with twine. Seattle made me. Damp cuffs, fog on breath, fairy horns bleeding into early light. I took the late shift at a nonprofit as a junior accountant, North Sound Shelter Coalition, spreadsheets like tiled sidewalks. Then the early shift at the bakery with Mom. We lived above the shop in a 1-bedroom loft where you could smell tomorrow's bread proofing as you fell asleep. The radiator clicked during the wind. When the oven went on at 4 a.m., the floor warmed our feet. We weren't rich, but we were held, like dough cupped in palms. My mother, Lydia to customers, Mom to me, could laminate butter into language. She was funny in the way of people who've done inventory alone at midnight. Dry, a little mean if you earned it, and tender about the right kinds of failure. Burn the first batch, she taught me. Get the mistakes out of your hands. She had me at 19 and told me, gently, that my father had been a season. We didn't waste breath on him. I grew up stocky strong from lifting flour sacks and case boxes, a girl with forearms like a line cook's, and a mind that filed everything. If you opened a cabinet wrong, I heard it. If you skimmed a 5 from the register, I knew it the second we balanced. People talk about found family like it's a trend. Mine was found and placed. Mrs. Kim from the dry cleaner who kept a spare key in case, though the case was never said. Charlie from the bar who ran our jars of quarters when the Coinstar jammed. Tasha from the nonprofit who wore lipstick like armor and texted me pictures of dogs she saw on her runs. At night, my mother would put on Motown and scrub sugar from sheet pans. I'd finish my month end highlighting cells until my brain clicked into that satisfying math hum. We were tidy. We were tired. We were steady. The first time I saw Dane Porter, he was balancing a case of eggs on one shoulder like a lumberjack on a calendar. He had a smile that looked algorithmically approved, 8 teeth showing, no gums, and eyes crinkling exactly 3 crinkles. His jacket smelled like motor oil and peppermint gum. "New supplier," my mother said, not looking at me when she said it, the way she didn't look at a hot pan. "Tyson's cousin. Cheaper. He has a line on flour." "Flour?" I echoed, watching him glide through the narrow back hall as if he'd lived there long enough to map it with his hip. The crate landed soft. He wiped his hands on a clean towel like he knew clean towels. Then he winked. Actually winked and said, "I've heard about your morning buns, Lydia." She laughed in a way that made me want to refile the silverware. She said, "Careful, flattery earns you extra work." Dane came back and kept coming back. He brought flour in 50-pound sacks taped with a different tape each week, blue painters, gray duct, a jaunty tartan I pretended not to notice. He carried them like they were paper. He carried himself like the room rose to meet him. He'd lean against the oven door and tell us about the morning market, the sweet deals, the way he could shave costs if we were flexible. He'd say, "Cash is king," tapping the register with 2 knuckles. "Banks don't need to be in every conversation." I'd laugh politely and then go upstairs and record every cash payout as a line item with a note in the memo. Ask Mom about Dane, supplier, tax? My job with the coalition taught me that the way money moves tells the story people won't. It's a language that doesn't lie, it just refuses to speak in anything but totals. My mother started wearing her hair down again. She started saying yes to deliveries after dark, a thing she'd never done. She said, "I trust him," when I asked about the receipts that had stopped. Sometimes you have to trust. Trust, I thought, is a ledger you don't get to audit until it's late fees. We still had our Sundays. She still sang to the radio under her breath, the low, broken-throated half melodies of people who've been brave for too long. But a new rhythm had shuffled into the backbeat. It sounded like plastic tape tearing from a roll. It sounded like a smile you could hear. I told myself what daughters always tell themselves at first. It's not that bad. It's nothing. It'll settle. I should have listened sooner to the part of me that flinched when Dane's peppermint came through the door before he did. Why does the smell arrive first if the man's honest? What kind of flower needs that much tape? 2 months into Dane's orbit, a letter arrived addressed to A. Hart. Thick paper, cream like a wedding invitation. I slit it with the paring knife we used for fruit, the scent of citrus oil and steel. The letterhead read, "Cascade Loan Services," and the words that slid into my stomach were, "We're delighted to welcome you as a preferred customer." The letter listed an account I'd never opened, with a limit I could never afford. A gentle paragraph explained my automatic payment plan had been established, connected to my credit union debit card on file. The card number was mine. The email address on the account was mine too, but off by 1 letter. The phone number wasn't. I felt the floor of the loft tilt. Upstairs, the radiator ticked 3 times. Outside, rain tapped on the skylight with the unhurried insistence of fingers on a table. I read the letter again. I read it a 3rd time, slower, as if reading could scramble time and make it make sense. I knew what identity theft looked like. I'd sat across from clients at the coalition, watching them twist tissue while they told me about card skimmers and boyfriends and cousins. I'd held their trembling hands and said, We'll call the bank together. I had never rehearsed the script for when the thief lived under my own feet. Mom, I said, the word catching like flour in throat. She was elbow deep in dough, forearms dusted like she'd been working in clouds. She glanced at the letter, then at me, then back to the dough. Something in her gaze skipped, like a track catching. We'll sort it, she said too quickly. Banks love to scare people. Scare people into what? I said, but my voice came out with too much air and not enough shape. The knife on the counter was sticky with orange. I wiped it clean because I needed a clean line somewhere. That night, when the ovens were cooling and the floor smelled like water in a hot pan, Dane came by to check on the new batch. He leaned on the register the way a man leans on a friend's shoulder. He smelled like peppermint and damp wool. I slipped the letter into my pocket and asked him a question so plain it was practically polite. Have you ever heard of Cascade Loan Services? He didn't blink. He didn't look up. He traced a finger around a coffee ring like he was drawing a moon. Sure, he said. They partner with small businesses sometimes. Good folks. Quick. How quick? I asked. He smiled at my mother over the register. As quick as a signature, he said. In a world that makes you wait, sometimes quick as mercy. That night, the email account connected to the loans sent me a welcome message. It ended with, "If you didn't request this, please contact us within 72 hours." When I clicked Forgot Password, the recovery text went to the not my number. I slept with the letter on my chest, a paperweight to keep me from floating off the known. The heat from the oven below bled through the floorboards. In my dream, sacks of flour breathed. Morning came like it always did. Locust hum of the neon sign, gutters gargling, the first slap of dough on wood, and yet a seam had ripped. It was small, neat, and irreversible. I didn't tell my mother I'd be late to the coalition. I didn't tell her I was going to the credit union with the letter and my driver's license and that brave, hollow voice I used for other people's emergencies. I just put on my raincoat and walked into the day that would pull us apart. Why did Dane know the name of a lender before I finished asking? At the credit union, the teller offered me a peppermint. I took it like a dare. The mint oil burned a small, defiant hole through the fog in my head as Marta, the fraud specialist, swiveled her screen. The fluorescent light washed everything flat. Her face, the desk, my future. "We can see 3 new accounts in your name," she said, tapping. "The one from your letter, a department store card opened 2 weeks ago, and an application pending with—" Her mouth did the thing people do when they want to prepare you for bad but don't want to own it. "With Puget Home Finance." "I didn't apply," I said. The mint cracked between my teeth. "I didn't apply for anything." "We'll flag them," she said. "Freeze, notify, file. It's a slog, but we'll get there." She printed forms that smelled like hot toner and humidity. "Sometimes it's family," she added, carefully, like a nurse naming a symptom she wishes she didn't see so often. "Someone who knows your SSN, your patterns, your—" "My mother wouldn't," I said too fast. "She wouldn't." When I stepped out, the rain had eased into a mist that felt like breath on skin. I should have gone to the coalition. I should have gone anywhere but the bakery. Instead, I went home. Downstairs, Linden Street felt wrong by a single degree, as if the thermostat had been nudged. A new stack of flour sacks hulked against the walk-in, each seam bandaged with tartan tape. Dane's jacket hung on a hook beside my mother's apron, his sleeve threaded through her strap like fingers. "Where were you?" my mother asked. She was icing lemon bars, the air sugared with zest and butter. If heaven has a smell, it's lemon icing. If hell does, it's lemon icing with a smear of fear under it. "Bank," I said. Her hand paused. A drip of icing fattened, then slid down the side of a square. "Oh?" "There are accounts in my name," I said, placing the letter on the counter like a challenge coin. "Someone used my card. Someone used my number." She breathed in, small and shallow like a bird in a hand. Then she looked at me with eyes I knew from nights the mixer broke, and the morning rolled toward us like a freight. "I did," she said. "It was not a confession. It was a receipt. For the store card, just that. We needed a new compressor, and sales were down, and Dane said—" Her glance skipped to the hook, to the jacket. "I meant to tell you. I was going to. I'll pay it back." I tasted mint and bile. "You used my name," I said, and the words felt like stepping on something you thought was floor, but isn't. "You used my name." A bell chimed as the door opened. Dane slid in with the weather, easy as a box. "Morning, ladies," he said, and when he saw my face, he performed concern like an actor hitting his light. "Everything all right?" "Get out," I said, shocking even myself with the clean edge of it. "Ava! Don't!" Dane lifted his hands, palms open, the tired theater of men who know their audience. "I was only trying to help. Lydia gets such rough terms with her credit. We just use the lines available. Households do it all the time." "Households," I repeated. "You're not my household." The door chime sounded again as he left. The lemon icing set in pale skins on the pan. "I'm your mother," she said, finally. "I have done everything for you. You stole my name." And for a second, she flinched like I'd struck her. She moved faster then. "It's solved," she said, brittle and brisk, the way she triaged burned cookies. "We'll pay it. It's small. You don't understand how hard it's been since COVID, how the loans keep changing shape, how the rent—" "How many?" I asked. "How many accounts?" "2," she said. "Maybe 3. But the loan with Cascade?" She looked down, and I knew the truth before she said it. "That wasn't me." When you spend your life balancing drawers, you learn the difference between a lie and a void. A lie is heavy. It has edges. You can fit your hands under it. A void is cold, inhaling. I walked to the sacks of flour and pressed my palm against the tartan tape. It stuck under my skin with a tacky whisper. Under it, the fabric was pulled too tight as if the sack held its breath. I slid my nail under a corner. Plastic lifted an inch. My mother's gasp cut the air in half. "Ava, don't!" I peeled back an inch. A sour chemical note rose, threaded with perfume. Flour puffed, but something else lurked. A vacuum bag, slick as a seal's back. Inside, shapes. Not flower-shaped. Boxy. Hard. "Stop!" my mother said, grabbing my wrist with the strength that had lifted ovens into place. "Stop!" Behind us, the coffee steamer hissed, spitting a ghost. "You said Dane had a line on flour. Does his line go through customs?" She let go. "It's just a delivery. It's just a favor." Flour dust clung to the wet at my hairline. It felt like a mask I hadn't chosen. Outside, a bus sighed. Somewhere, someone laughed. I covered the tear and pressed the tape flat with both hands until the adhesive warmed and held. Then I pressed my palms to the counter and breathed through my nose until my lungs stopped scratching. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I went upstairs and made a spreadsheet. When I'm scared, I make columns. It's the only prayer I know. What's worse, the debt you can count or the kind you can carry? When I was 17, I filled out my FAFSA at the kitchen table with a pen that skipped. I remember the scratch of it, the way the ball snagged at the S in heart. I remember my mother's hand on my shoulder when I asked about our taxes. "We'll figure it out," she said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "We always do." The spreadsheet I built that night pulled my credit history from the teeth of 3 bureaus and fed it into a sheet that glowed like a hospital monitor. I color-coded by date opened, limit, issuer, status. Orange for unknown, red for wrong. The numbers told a story that started at 17. There had been a small furniture card, opened and closed in a year, paid. A cell phone line added and removed. A medical bill sent to collections and settled. Each item was a breadcrumb, each breadcrumb a shape that could be my mother's hand. She had been keeping the bakery alive like a person bailing a boat with a mug. When the boat's name is Daughter, you bail harder because you believe the water's your right. I found one more line in the history, hidden like a hairline crack in a bowl. Retail installment loan, $3,000. Opened May 2014, paid November 2015. I scrolled to the creditor name and felt the air cool. Evergreen Appliances. The summer I was 17, our oven died. The old beast that gave us cinnamon mornings and paid our rent shuddered its last heat and went gray. We couldn't afford a new one. I remember the way my mother stared at the empty space, the way silence tensed like a cat. A week later, a gleaming workhorse arrived, and my mother made a joke about a guardian angel with a store card. It had been me. I had been the angel I didn't know I was. The first twist wasn't the new loans. Those were a fresh bruise. It was the realization that my mother had started carving my name out of me a decade ago, one sliver at a time, to prop up the life that kept us together. You can't see the scar when it matches the thing you love. I put the old and the new in separate tabs. The before Dane column looked like a woman fighting to stay above water and stealing sips from her daughter's glass. The after Dane column looked like velocity, larger limits, cleaner applications, bolder moves. My email, my card, my number 2 steps to the left. He had taught her speed. He had taught her to strip the serial numbers from your own. I didn't sleep. I watched the sky lighten in that Seattle way where dim turns to different dim. When the first garbage truck rattled past, I texted Tasha, "I need to ask you about a man who tapes flour like it's radioactive." She called immediately. "Where are you?" I said, "Home," not meaning it. "Come to the coalition," she said. "Bring everything." I printed the sheets and put them in a folder with a cracked corner. I put the folder in a tote bag that said, "Be kind, rewind," because irony calls to us when we least deserve it. Then I went downstairs to tell my mother I loved her and that I was leaving. I told myself I would say it soft. I told myself I would say it true. She didn't look up from the register when I did. She said, "Dane says the shipment needs to go out before noon. He says time is tight." I looked at the sacks. I looked at her hands, clean of flour. I looked at the way the tartan tape caught the light. "Whose time?" I asked. She pressed her lips together, color rising high on her cheeks as if something hot had touched them from the inside. "If you make a mess of this, I can't clean it up." I tucked Be Kind, Rewind under my arm. The bag thumped against my hip like a second heart. Then I opened the door to a day that didn't know me yet. When a lie keeps you afloat, who drowns when you let go? The coalition's office smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink and the stale hope of grant language. The waiting room's chairs squeaked in unison when people shifted. A heater ticked the way a nervous person clicks a pen. It was the sound of good intentions chewing on themselves. Tasha spread my printouts across a conference table and stabbed at the Dane column with a nail the color of ripe cherries. "Tape?" she asked. "Tartan," I said. "Different each week." "That's staging," she said. "Keeps shipments organized by buyer or route. He's using your mother's bakery as a front." "For what?" I asked, though I knew. You know the shape of a crime by the way it hides. The vacuum bags, the smell, the precision. "Pills?" I whispered. "Cash? Both?" "Could be anything small and valuable," Tasha said. "Jewelry, phones, fentanyl. But the money part," she tapped the spreadsheet. "This is a pattern. Open cards, spend, pay minimums enough to look alive, layer cash sales with deposits that match plausible pastry numbers. Classic Little Lake laundering." She turned the page and then softer, "I'm sorry about your mom." "She started it," I said, and my breath fogged at the inside of my own throat. "Before him. Little things. She saved us with me." "That's how they get you," Tasha said. They step into a need that already exists. He's not a storm, he's a leak. We called a detective, Sergeant Nolan, from the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. On the phone, his voice was coffee gravel. Don't touch the product. Document. If you can get manifests, invoices, photos of the interior. The interior of sealed sacks? I said, remembering the whisper of tape under my nail. If you'll spook them, he said. We build what we can with the legal we can. You said there's a shipment today. Noon, I said. Let us follow it, he said. If your mother is knowingly moving contraband, that's one set of charges. If she's being used, that's another. If he's using her to steal your identity, I said, he is. He learned from her. On the way back, the bus air was damp with wet wool and oranges. A little boy in a dinosaur raincoat pressed his nose to the window and made fog monsters with his breath. I clutched Be Kind, Rewind, and tried not to picture my mother's hands tying twine around boxes like gifts. At 11:38, I slipped into the alley behind the bakery and filmed with my phone from under my hood. The rain had softened to a drift, soft as flour. A white van idled, exhaust making ghosts around the bumper. The driver wore a beanie pulled low and a face the color of that beanie. Dane stood with a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. Mom hovered at the edge, like a person about to decline a dance, and accept it anyway. They loaded flour sacks into the van with a ballet that made my stomach flip. 2 up, 1 down. Tartan, in neat families. Dane checked items off. A conductor satisfied with his orchestra's timing. My mother signed the clipboard, her red nails stark against a column of lines. When they were done, Dane clapped her shoulder, a friendly thump that made her flinch. The van pulled away. Another slid in. It was a relay. Quiet and precise. If I hadn't known, I would have said it was beautiful. Humans, moving, working, weight shifting through hands. Beauty can be treason. When the second van left, I stepped out. My mother started like I appeared from smoke. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Filming," I said. Her eyes went wide enough to show me a strip of whites I hadn't seen since I was 8 and broke a mixing bowl. "Delete it," she said. In that second, I made a choice that split me along a seam that would never truly mend. I shook my head. She didn't yell. She went quiet. "Then you can't stay here," she said. And it was so calm, I almost missed the way her hands shook. "You can't be here if you're going to do this to me." "This to you?" I said, and the alley felt suddenly smaller than my breath. "He's using the bakery for survival," she snapped. "For a patch until things settle. You don't know what it costs to keep a place like this open." "I know exactly what it costs. I've been counting since I was tall enough to see the drawer." Dane stepped out. Chewing gum, the shape of it obscene in that moment. "Everything good?" he asked. His eyes flicked to my phone. "We've got privacy rules back here, Ava." "Call your lawyer," I said. And the moment the words left me, I felt the funhouse mirrors shift. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the problem. He smiled like I'd done him a favor. At 12:07, the third van left. At 12:12, the patrol car rolled slow down the alley, just another lazy afternoon in a city that had learned not to see its own bones. My phone pinged. "Sit tight. We're on it. Sergeant Nolan." At 2:20, the door to the loft clicked behind me with the little sad sound of a lock doing what locks do. My mother's voice came through the wood. "You need to find somewhere else. For a while. Until this calms." I pressed my forehead to the door, feeling the cool paint, the tiny grit of drips caught in the grain. "Mom," I said, and my breath broke on the O. "Please." Her hand rested on the other side. I could tell by the soft thunk. "You were always so good with numbers," she whispered. "Go balance this." By 7 p.m., my trash bags waited in the rain, and the hook that had held our aprons hung empty. Dane's sleeve had been removed from hers. The space between hooks was the exact width of a choice. When you love someone, how long can you count before the numbers turn mean? There's a point in every spreadsheet where the columns can't hold the story anymore, where the cells choke on context and the function returns #value. That night, after I moved my bags to Tasha's couch, I stared at the ceiling fan turning slow and made a decision I had avoided because it required me to invert a word that had built me. I chose loyalty to truth over loyalty to blood. It felt like stepping into cold water on purpose. It felt like the first cut into a bag of flour, the sigh it makes as it collapses. I texted Sergeant Nolan and said I would get everything I could get without breaking anything that would break a case. Receipts, names, times, the pattern of tape, the shift schedules, the deposits times, the cash outs, the favor list scribbled on the back of a vendor invoice in my mother's handwriting. And then I asked for something else. I asked Tasha to come with me to meet Mrs. Kim at the dry cleaner, the keeper of the spare key, the quiet guardian. We sat at her counter while the press hissed in the back and the smell of hot starch braided with steam. I told her I needed the key. I told her I would keep my hands clean. I told her we could help my mother if we moved before someone else did. Mrs. Kim slid the key across the counter, her face a careful calm. "Mothers are like ovens," she said unexpectedly. "They burn themselves to feed you, but sometimes they burn the bread." I taped the key to the inside of my wrist with clear tape and felt its cool insistence against my pulse. At 1:40 a.m., Tasha and I slipped through the back like girls who know where the creeks are. The bakery in the dark smelled like ghosts who had been kind. The mixer's steel was a black river. The racks were spines. We didn't open sacks. We opened drawers. We photographed invoices and shipment logs and Dane's lazy clipboard notes where he wrote tartan, green, or tartan, red-blue, and added +2 for P. We shot the serials on the walkie-talkies. We shot the underside of the register where someone had taped a paper with bank runs and total amounts that didn't match the morning's POS. We shot the calendar with Puget Storage circled on Tuesdays and Fridays. At 2:18 a.m., my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Stop. You don't know what you're doing." The bubble was gray and cold. I turned the phone over and set it face down, screen a dark coin on stainless steel. "We're leaving," I whispered to Tasha, and as we slipped out, my arm brushed a sack. The tartan bitten by the light looked festive. I thought, this is how they sell you a crime. They wrap it like a present. By the time the sky paled, the photos were in a cloud folder with a name that would make sense to no one but me: lemony icing. When truth is a blade, where do you cut so the artery is spared? Sergeant Nolan's team followed the Friday route to Puget Storage, a maze of orange doors and concrete that smelled like dust and a faint, sweet rot. They watched as Dane keyed in and rolled a dolly stacked with tartan-wrapped sacks to Unit B-17. They watched as a man with a shaved head and a navy hoodie arrived 15 minutes later in a sedan with dealer plates. They watched a quiet exchange of clipboards and nods and no money in the open. They watched for 3 days. On the 4th, they watched my mother carry a sack herself. I saw the photos in a windowless room where the air conditioner hummed its white, relentless tone. The pictures were clean, clinical, my mother's back bending, her hand on the dolly, the smear of tartan against concrete. My throat felt lined with flour. I swallowed, and it turned to paste. "She's not scared," I said, too defensively. "She looks committed." "She is," Nolan said. "This isn't a one-off, but there's something else you should see." He slid a document across the table. A transfer of ownership draft for Linden Street Bakery from Lydia Hart to Ava Hart, effective next month. There was a note clipped to it in my mother's handwriting. "Get her to sign. Clean slate for me." The second twist landed so cleanly, I admired its craft. She was going to hand me the bakery just as the money finished running through it. When the cops opened the sacks, the paper would say I owned the crimes. She wasn't just stealing my name anymore. She was wrapping it around a bomb and walking away. "She wouldn't," I said, and even I didn't believe me. "We can't prove she understands the whole scheme," Nolan said, "but we can prove intent to transfer liability. It aligns with a pattern we see when mules age up and want an exit with a soft landing." "My mother is not a mule," I snapped. "I hope you're right," he said, not unkindly. "But she is a person in too deep." He slid another photo over. Dane laughing with the shaved head man, the angle showing Dane's tattoo, a line of small squares up the tendon of his wrist. We ran him. He's used 3 names in 5 years. Porter is new. He's a node. He plugs into businesses on the edge. He persuades. He tapes. Tasha squeezed my knee under the table, grounding me in the most old-fashioned way. Her hand was warm. The AC was not. The photos smelled like nothing, which felt like a betrayal of the senses. I stood. Don't arrest her yet. Please, let me talk to her. If she signs anything, it can't be because she's been tricked. It has to be because she chose it. Choice, I thought, is the only kind of mercy that hurts. No one said we could have one conversation. Public place, recorded with a plainclothes officer nearby. No promises. We see a handoff, we move. We picked Volunteer Park, open enough to run, covered enough to listen. Morning dew kissed the grass. Kids screamed a joy scream on the playground that sawed through me unexpectedly. My mother was already there on a bench, hands folded, face set. She wore her hair down. Her lipstick was the color of strawberries left out in the sun. Ava, she said, as if my name tasted different now. Let's be quick. I sat and set my phone on the bench between us. You were going to give me the bakery, she said. I thought you wanted it. You always said you would. Next month. Why then? Her mouth did a stubborn line I recognized from every no she had ever said to me. It's a good time, she said. The books are, she caught herself, clean. They're not, I said softly. They haven't been for a long time. She turned then, sharp, eyes bright and wet in a way I'd rarely seen. You don't get to judge the things I did to keep you fed. I'm not judging that. I'm judging this. This is different. This will put me in prison. She stared at the phone. Is that on? She asked. Yes, I said. Then for the record, she said, and I felt my heart rise into my throat. I know what's in the flour. I know what Dane brings. I know what he takes. And when I sign the paper, it will be because this has to end, and you'll be safe because I will make sure it's clean before I give it to you. The second twisted again. She wasn't handing me the bomb. She was telling herself she would defuse it. The story she believed was a fable about a woman who cleans messes before anyone sees them. It had worked with me, for a while. Why not here? Mom, I whispered, you can't clean this fast enough. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and for a second I saw the girl she'd been at 19, brave and terrified in a city that ate both for breakfast. She said, then help me, or get out of the way. She walked away. A finch scolded from a hedge like a wind-up toy. My phone sat on the bench like a third person neither of us liked. Nolan's man in the hoodie texted, that's enough. When a person believes they are the hero of their own cleanup, what explosion convinces them they're holding dynamite? The raid happened the next morning before dawn, because that's when kitchens belong to who they really belong to. The street was blue with early, the rain a fine net. I watched from across the way, hands buried in my coat pockets up to the wrists like I could tuck the shaking away. They didn't break the door. They didn't need to. Nolan used the key we'd borrowed from Mrs. Kim, returned with an apology and a bag of scones. 4 officers ghosted in, lean and quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes from hard shoes on soft hearts. I saw my mother step back from the mixer, uncomprehending for a second the way you do when life decides to change your shift without telling you. Dane moved. He reached for the hook where his jacket hung, his hand sliding toward the inside pocket with that smooth muscle memory men like him train early. Nolan barked, and the bark was a wall. Hands up. Palms out. Dane's square's tattoo flexed as he obeyed too slowly. Lydia Hart, Nolan said, voice steady as a cutting board. We have a warrant. For what? She said. And I believed she wanted to know, to pin it to a name so she could plan the scrub. Trafficking, he said, money laundering, identity theft. She reeled on that last one like the floor had shifted under only her. Her eyes scanned and found me across the street, a small wet figure, not waving, not drowning. Her face did a thing like bread collapsing. The sacks opened like their seams had rehearsed it. Vacuum bags slid out, slickly obscene. Inside, phones in neat bricks, pills in blister packs, jewelry coiled in little plastic stomachs. The smell was chemicals and human breath. Dane pivoted, calculating. My mother stepped between him and the door like a reflex. He hesitated, the calculus of a man who expects women to move, and the point in the equation labeled underestimation saved her. The cuffs clicked on his wrists with a sound like a lid on a jar. "It's not what it looks like," my mother said, automatic as breathing. "It's exactly what it looks like," Nolan said, tired, and also worse. In the alley, the van idled. A driver slouched. Then 3 slouches became sprints when they saw the uniforms. Someone shouted. The fine rain stitched the scene together. My mother turned to me across the street. My name trembled on her mouth, an old word in a new language. "Ava," she said, and it came out a plea. I stepped forward because even now something in me is wired to stand when she calls. The bakery smell was a ruin of what it had been. The ovens hummed like machines that had no right to care what they warmed. I stopped just outside the door's reach. "Ava, I would have cleaned it." "I know," I said, and meant it. That's the problem. They read her rights. She nodded like she was being told an order was ready. When Nolan asked if she wanted to say anything, she said what I didn't expect. Yes. She looked at me, not at him. She said, "I used your name," in a voice that shook on the d in used. "I started it when you were 17. I told myself I was borrowing. I told myself I would pay it back. I told myself I was saving us. And then she fleeked her chin at Dane, he told me I could save us faster." "And?" Nolan prompted. "And I liked fast. And the honesty in it was a clean wound. I liked how it felt to be the person who fixed it in a day instead of a year." Dane, in cuffs, pivoted his head toward me and smiled like a man who'd picked the wrong movie but stayed for the popcorn. "Apples, trees, you got your mother's—" "Shut up," I said, and the words snapped like bone. They took him first. He went smooth, a boy at prom pretending to enjoy the song. They took my mother next. She broke once quietly when the cuffs surprised her wrists with their cold. "Be kind, rewind," she whispered, eyeing my tote like it was an altar. "Mom," I said, stepping to the threshold, and then the motion stopped me. The line between in and out is smaller than the thickness of a door jamb. "I'll bake again," she said, defiant and broken and still somehow wholly herself. "I'll burn the first batch." Then she was gone, and the bakery exhaled. When the only thing stronger than love is the habit of fixing, how do you live without both? The city moved on with a shrug. It gives everything it refuses to look at too closely. The neon sign came down with a crack and a shower of powdered glass that glittered like a fake snow nobody asked for. A for lease sign went up in the window, fat and cheery as a clown. People walked past. Some slowed, peered in, put palms to glass like ghosts auditioning. I took a second job at a small CPA firm because even revolutionaries have rent. I learned the particular patience of repair. Phone calls and bad hold music, letters in triplicate, the slow unbraiding of identity and debt. The bank removed the loans like splinters. The bureaus grudged my disputes into deletions. It took months. It will take years to trust the quiet. Tasha kept a pillow on her couch with my shape. She fed me pasta and told me dumb jokes until laughter returned as a reflex instead of a choice. Mrs. Kim sent me home with shirts she didn't charge for. The coalition sent a basket I refused and then accepted, because refusal is pride dressed up like a virtue. My mother took a plea, 18 months with probation and restitution. She asked the judge to let her work in the prison kitchen, and the judge, a woman with a mouth set like mortar, said yes. Dane flipped on someone bigger and will serve longer than he'd planned and less than he deserves. The sacks told their whole story in evidence bags. The tartan tape turned back into tape. I visited my mother once a month. The first time I brought lemon bars I wasn't allowed to bring in. We sat across from each other at a table that insisted on calling itself a table, and I watched her hands, clean and idle. "I can't hear the mixer at night," she admitted. "It's like losing a neighbor you thought you didn't like." "The oven?" I asked. "Still hums," she said, "in my head." She smiled, quick, like a candle. "I'll burn the first batch when I get out," she said, "just to keep the ritual happy." We wrote letters that smelled like nothing. We said "I love you" in ways that didn't pretend love erased receipts. We put truth in the ledger and let it sit there, unbalanced, but entered. On good days, I believed in the math of it. On a Tuesday in June, I walked past the bakery and saw a young couple measuring the windows, their tape bright as a new idea. I stood and watched them argue softly about a counter and a pastry case, their hands drawing imaginary rectangles in the air. Hope smells like sawdust and coffee. It always will. I went home to my small, clean apartment. The radiator clicked in a language I could now translate. I made myself a grilled cheese and ate it standing at the counter with my fingers, like a person who is allowed to be informal in her own life. When the letter came from the prison, my mother's handwriting on the front, the L in Lydia as extravagant as ever, I held it to my face and inhaled, expecting lemon getting paper. Inside, a recipe card. Lemon icing. At the bottom, a line. Burn the first batch. Don't burn yourself. How do you start again when the scent of the past is baked into the walls? You open the window and let the rain in. I used to think safety was a pastry case lined with perfect rows, everything glazed and labeled, the illusion of choice curving gently under glass. I know better now. Safety is a ledger that names what you take and what you owe. It's a door you lock, not because you're afraid, but because names matter, and you're learning to keep yours. My mother loved me in a way that cost me. I loved her in a way that cost her. Those truths can sit side by side without canceling each other. They can coexist like cinnamon and heat. Dangerous if you don't respect the sequence. Exquisite if you do. I'm kinder now, oddly, because I count. I'm slower now, stubbornly, because I learned to despise fast fixes. When I smell peppermint, I count my change. When I taste lemon, I write to my mother. When I hear tape ripping from a roll, I stand up to the door and see who's there. If you ask me whether I forgive her, I will tell you forgiveness is a moving sum. Some days the math is generous. Some days it's strict. But it's always honest. I owe her my life, and she owes me my name. We pay down what we can. We carry what we can't. We don't pretend the carrying is the same as paying. The rain comes. The oven's cool. I keep a recipe on my fridge that makes enough icing for 24 bars and 2 people who are trying. I am my mother's daughter and also not. I count, I bake, I lock the door. Then I open it when the right knock comes.